Rob,
Howdy, howdy.
welcome to Value Stack.
Let's do it.
Number 25, man. We're counting.
I wish I could have been 21, but
Yeah.
I will accept 25 because it means that you're growing.
Yeah, we're building. I finally tweeted, I am building.
And?
It got like 9 likes. So
Huge. This is big in the Twitter sphere.
the burger, the one of like, have you seen the tweet about the whole coiner burger?
No.
That's my best performing tweet.
The whole coiner burger.
It says like, one day I will open a burger shop and this will be on the menu. And this one's called the whole coiner. And it's like a double burger with like onions and, you know, got to have the brioche bun.
Yum. Was there a photo?
Yeah, there's a photo. Yeah,
That's
I find
the
that
game
like
changer.
when you put photos in your pictures, like Twitter's algo just like bumps it up.
Photos and videos. It likes the videos too. It makes me think that that the algorithm gods are trying to come for TikTok.
Well, he's got something to say about that.
We're too degen though. We're too toxic. We can't. We can't be controlled. Twitter. I've been telling people that Twitter is basically LinkedIn if you think you're unemployable, because LinkedIn. There was the meme going around of the guy that was guy posted online. He was like, "Yeah, you know, I was going to work one day. I had this job interview, but I missed it because there was this homeless dog on the street, and I like took the dog, and I got him some food." And I thought I missed this interview. And then I got a call the next day to come in again. And I came in, and the interviewer was the dog. And that's basically what LinkedIn is.
Oh, my God.
And Twitter is not that.
Did you see, is it Croesus? He finally... I
was on that episode of Why Are We Bullish? Got to see his face for the first time.
Yeah, I commented. I friended him on LinkedIn like right after, and I commented on his post about like coming out, you know,
Showing the face.
Yeah, like coming out of hiding, not coming out in that way. And I commented, I just want you to know that I've been waiting to comment here about figuring, like, thank you for finally telling all my LinkedIn friends like why they don't understand Bitcoin. So it's like, it's great to be, it's great to see you on here on the other, like on the other side now,
Yep.
you know, because it's I think he had that one is like why the yuppie elite dismiss Bitcoin.
So good.
And
some people just knock it out of the park with they put out these little articles, these things that just turn into bugs and they get into people's heads, and that's one of those articles.
The simpler you can like distill it.
Unstoppable. It's such a great little article. And the funny thing is that it's not even within his quote unquote technical expertise.
Well,
because
he's got the MBA background.
He's a fund guy, right? He's not supposed to be like the liberal arts communicator. Here is a larger commentary on the culture, which is what that piece was. He's a very analytic, very much sort of model-based, run it 1,000 times type guy.
Where, I like the real estate where it's like that one graphic where he shows like you can own the land of the internet in a way. And it's like shows like towers where it's like Facebook and Google.
I haven't seen this.
And they, let's see if I can bring it up.
He's the man. This is now just a Croesus simp podcast.
Yeah, this is
us just going hard for Croesus.
It's cool. We'll cut some of it. But. Well, he's got a compendium of his work here. So there's the basically his talk was about you know, in the internet you couldn't own the protocol.
Mm-hmm.
The only way to benefit from an investment perspective was to buy the companies that built on the internet.
Yes.
And now here it is right here. And now you can actually build. You can own stake of the protocol itself.
Oh.
And so he shows like, you know, you can actually own the land that think of like, Casa and Kraken and Coinbase and all these companies as like the buildings on the land.
Sure.
And you can buy the building. You can invest in the building if you want, but you can also invest in the land that the building's going to be on. Which is the network underlying. Whereas with the internet, there was really no way.
There's no ability to do that.
Right.
That's such a great example.
You had to pick one of these privately held companies or publicly traded companies to benefit from the internet, which is why so much of the value got ballooned at the top
into singular entities because you had to get on the fastest growing building because it wasn't like you could actually get the ground.
Right. You couldn't buy the ground. You had to buy a building. So the buildings got bid way up when really
what a great example.
Yeah. When the ground was really what was so valuable.
That's where this is going. I think that this just culturally in the Bitcoin space, it's interesting to see how there have always been communicators in the space, people who have to skirt the line between something that is, simple if explained right, but still profoundly technical in a lot of ways. And every stage you get people that are the sort of communicator of that era. And it seems to me that as we get closer to the broad-based adoption of what we're doing, right, with Bitcoin standardization, you have to introduce all these different types of communicators, because it used to just be Andreas, right? And he was out there and he was kind of like your IT tech bro for explaining Bitcoin to you. And he had the technical chops, but he could also explain it really elegantly. And all of a sudden you've got people who are in these various domains of like just pure culture or, the investment side of things or whatever industry it might be, beef in Bitcoin. And there's people that have to like learn how to translate across that medium.
Yeah. Like
which is so interesting.
It's hitting so many different parts of life now. It used to just be like the cryptography, cypherpunks. And now you've got, like you said, like the beef people. You've got, you also have like the cryptographers and all, but you have people who are, gun advocates, who are the libertarians. I think of the guys at Tahini's. It's like it's spreading to all aspects of life, and the oil and gas industry. Obviously, that's like a big part of what we'll talk about, and it's hitting the parts of like every part of life, because ultimately, like, it's just money, right?
Yeah.
So money hits everything.
The funny thing too to me is that we're gonna have, and I've seen it a bunch, and I've been hollering this from the parapets for the last couple of years. You're always going to alienate the prior cohort of people, right? And so you have this sort of this strange dichotomy in Bitcoin where it's money for enemies and it's for everybody.
At the same time.
And then you have the older cohort of folks who adopt it, who may have been more of a libertarian, anarcho-capitalist than sort of conservative-minded individuals who got to it, because I think conservatism as maybe a political ideology got to Bitcoin prior to the sort of broad spectrum of, the rest of the political ecosystem.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you watch like progressive Bitcoiners coming into the space and going, this is for us too. And the first thing out of people's mouths is, no, you're doing it wrong. It's like, well,
it can't be for
everyone is doing it. They're still going to do it. And there's going to be a very odd conversation, or continuing conversation, when in the next cycle or whatever, you're seeing these odd bedfellows start to rally around each other for the same thing in the name of, Bitcoin, the network, the money, fixing the money. And it doesn't make any sense. And then you've got the best example to my mind is using waste natural gas to mine Bitcoin. It's one of these bizarre things that the oil and gas bros and the hyper progressive climate change bros agree 100% on.
Yeah.
And there's this very strange where the culture is growing. People are, adopting it and using it and interested in implementing Bitcoin for their own reasons. And it's like they still kind of just hate the crap out of each other. And it doesn't make any sense. But as the ecosystem goes and more people are exposed to Bitcoin, inevitably you just get odd bedfellows. And I think that'll go away, to be honest with you.
Right.
Like, being a Bitcoiner is not going to be a thing.
Right.
In 30 years.
That's what Mark Goodwin and I, we joked about. We're like, all of us wearing Bitcoin shirts. It's just going to be like,
it's going to be dumb.
Our grandkids are going to be like, you were wearing a shirt that said money?
That's lame. Why would you wear a shirt? It'd be the equivalent now of just having, well, I guess, no, maybe it's a different connotation if you have like your Hot Topic shirt with your dollar signs on it, right?
Yeah, well, that's pretty.
In the rap video.
But
yeah, it's going to be just as cringe.
That's why I want the swag, like some Upstream Data swag, or some like distributed hash, some Lightning Venture swag. It's like all of the like
position yourself.
The clothing that only a Bitcoiner could recognize that is Bitcoin clothing.
Sure,
that's the like level of OPSEC you need to keep. You don't want to just wear a big orange bee.
Yeah,
but wearing something like a 1031 hat. I know McCormick does that in all his videos. Like, that's like a subtle. Like,
it's the subtle
hey, I'm
flex.
a Bitcoiner.
It's the subtle flex. I'm down for the subtle flex.
Well, you flexed pretty hard at the courthouse the other day.
That was a good transition. Brilliantly done.
Going on record saying Bitcoin miners are like dung beetles.
100%.
Can you
100%
walk us through like how you came up with that analogy and where you got the pizzazz to be like, you know, this is what I'm going to say in my 3 minutes.
On the drive there, first off. Because we are. This is the thing that everybody gets wrong about. Nobody understands mining. Nobody. People who work in mining don't understand mining. People who've been in mining since 2013 don't understand mining. I think if you know Alex from Kaboom Racks, he says it. He said it most beautifully the last time we were hanging out. He was just very flat out. There are no experts in Bitcoin mining. And I was like, okay, on the face of it, I agree with that 100%. But what's your rationale? He goes, this industry is not 10 years old, and it's changed so much even in the last 5 years. The audacity that you would have to call yourself an expert of something that nobody is an expert of. Nobody is an expert of. And just because there's publicly traded companies that are doing Bitcoin mining doesn't mean that they are experts in what they're doing. Because it's what's happening right now. You know, we're watching them get liquidated. Who was it that just had to sell?
Argo
had to sell 3,600.
Yeah.
It was 3,600 miners at a price of $2K. About 2 Gs per S19, these used miners. They're going to liquidate it to do some funding. These guys don't know, just because they're publicly traded doesn't
anybody
mean that
can plug
a
machine in, but like maybe that's even given too little credit to miners, but it's like plugging in and hashing is like step 1, or like or maybe that's like step 50, the final step. But like the other steps are what, like planning we were talking a little bit before we started recording, like about airflow and planning heat and planning, like you've seen Marathon with like, they have all these miners just sitting around because they don't have the infrastructure to plug them in. They don't have the energization. So it's like planning the biz, right? It's easy to, you could be a Bitcoin miner, you can plug it in, but like planning a successful business around Bitcoin mining, you have to be that type of savvy business person.
That's
like
right.
Creative, finding an advantage that other people overlook.
And why did everybody get liquidated? It's because they over leveraged.
Right.
Why did they over leverage? Because they got on the hype train and realized one aspect of Bitcoin mining while forgetting about the other, which is that you protect your downside.
Right.
Nobody planned for a bear market. Everyone played for the bull market.
What do you think the CEOs of these like publicly traded miners were thinking? Like, did they think that the dollar was going to go to hyperinflation immediately, and that like there was never going to, like, was that the final?
Some guys
cycle?
Figured it out. I firmly believe that Bitcoin miners are dung beetles, 100%. And it's like I articulated. So what you're referring to is I went to. Myself and a whole bunch of other folks who are advocating in the space have been going to the Adams County Commissioner meetings to address the commissioners in regards to a lawsuit and a stay that they have put on a gentleman who is mining Bitcoin using essentially stranded natural gas, right? And the mechanism he's using for that is he's using these Upstream Data hash huts, which is half genset, which is just an engine. In this case, it's a V8 small block Chevy engine that is tuned to run on natural gas.
Amazing.
And instead of it going to a drive shaft that powers your car, it goes to a genset, or the whole thing is the genset. It goes to a generator that just converts that rotational energy into electricity. And that electricity goes directly in that same building, it's all on a single skid, into a data center that can hold, 12 in the small scale new gen machines if you're pushing something like 50 kilowatts, which is what one of these V8s might power. So all you're doing is you're consuming energy that's coming out of the ground. The energy being this methane. It's going into an engine. That engine is combusting it, turning it into electricity, and that electricity is going into Bitcoin miners that then are hashing to whatever pool you've got it hashing to. And it's essentially created an energy market on the well pad, which is incredible. You can now go out and go dig into the ground and pull a resource from the ground. And instead of having to get it to a pipeline or put it in a truck or transport it to an energy market to make it go somewhere and to be saleable, you can consume it on site, which is baffling. It's the equivalent of having a hydro plant that powers directly into your Bitcoin miners. Same thing, just different mechanism, right? One is combustion, one is obviously the flow of water. But this is where Bitcoin miners are going. and we're going to go seek out and consume everything that is waste or everything that is stranded. And so we were there amongst a whole bunch of folks addressing these commissioners because they approached us with the same kind of talking points, conversations that everybody starts with. You know, I've heard that Bitcoin mining uses a lot of energy, and we're supposed to assume that that's a bad thing,
right?
Which is insane to me. But the conversation is very much won by the climate intelligentsia, who have convinced us that the only way to live in the modern world is to slash the energy consumed.
When you look at like
in your life,
human lifespans, and
it's insane.
It's like they're directly correlated with kilowatt hours.
The ability
consumed.
to produce and consume energy. Even look at just the modern kitchen. What did the modern kitchen do to essentially put the American family in a position where your mom wouldn't have to spend, because it was predominantly moms historically. This is the modernization of America. You talk about like technologies like the birth control pill that all of a sudden allowed women to participate in society very differentially. Electricity was doing the same thing. The electrification of the home and the modern kitchen appliance, because that's predominantly where women were in sort of, you know, mid 20th century America. Think of the difference that a toaster or a dishwasher, an electric dishwasher, makes in your modern life. It's baffling. You know, the conveniences of life that you get that allow all of a sudden, you know, the modern family to evolve in a very, very different way. It's huge. And to say that you should de facto be consuming less energy for what reason doesn't make any sense to me. It's a huge topic of conversation. You know, I'm learning about it myself. I'd be a LARP if I was saying that I was some kind of expert in either Bitcoin mining or energy. But the core principle that I'm seeing emerge is essentially Bitcoin miners are most purely incentivized to seek out, to identify, and then to consume waste or excess energy wherever it exists.
And it's
wherever it exists.
And it's because they can do it right on site.
Like, and it's because we bring the market to you.
Right.
We bring the market to you.
That, like what we were talking just a few minutes ago about, like the planning of the mining operation, like how there's, you know, 30 steps up into that. I think about the same thing for an oil well. It's like, hey, getting the oil out of the ground is like step 10 maybe, but now we have to build a pipeline or some transportation method to distribute it out from this site. So and correct me if I'm wrong, but like this makes like the planning of like planning a new oil well much easier, right? Because now we can not necessarily easier, but like cheaper, because you don't have to build all of this infrastructure right away to start turning a profit. You can, let's say, like plug it in and then like run some miners, and then a year, 5 years later, when there's a bunch of people around there consuming that energy, then you can turn it off. Or
in principle, 100%. In the oil and gas side particularly, I am definitely not the right person to walk you through the process of permitting oil and gas wells and getting those operational. It's an incredibly complex process that requires a lot of intelligence and a lot of native expertise. One guy who's doing it just north of us, in Wyoming, Ryan Leachman, who's a Bitcoiner and awesome oil and gas guy. These guys know what they're doing, right? And this is why it's called wildcatting, because you can boom and bust if you screw up any single point of the process. The broader principle, though, is one around having the ability to essentially take energy wherever it may be and consume it on site. So a few examples, actually a direct example for what you just mentioned with the oil and gas. If you look at something like renewables, and I'm not going to get caught up in the whole like forget about solar, forget about wind, I want more energy. Like de facto, I want more energy that is available to humans to use. Personally, what I'm really starting to lean into and learn a little bit more about is the idea of energy sources that are centralized versus decentralized, because I think one thing that we don't really think about is the way that our electrical grid particularly works in the US is that it is either within these ISOs or RTO regions that are these highly regulated, extremely bureaucratic kind of rat's nests that you have to pick through to even understand how they operate, or they're in these various sort of free market arrangements, but everything is kind of a mess of bureaucracy and intervention and whatnot. But then if you look back in the broader trend, you see that energy consumption is not really decentralized really much of anywhere that you live. And, having solar panels on your roof and some Tesla batteries in there might put you off the grid. But I don't know that that's the solution for anyone. And so when you look at what people are building, you take something like a solar, some guys in Arizona hit us up at Upstream and they say, hey, we want to call you about using some of your hash huts. We say, okay, well, what are you doing? And they say exactly what you just said to me, which is, we're building a microgrid. It's solar. We can build it in about 12 months, but the permitting process that we have to go through to actually get it hot is going to take 24 to 36 months. So as I deploy capital on the building side of things, I'm going to have a dead asset for 1 or 2 years where everything is going to be operational, but I'm still having to run through all the rigmarole of attaching myself to the transmission system. So what do I do in the meantime? Well, okay, I built the thing. How about I monetize it? How about I throw some hash huts there with a few megawatts of miners, and I can monetize my asset immediately. And then when it comes time to connect it to the grid, well, what have I just done? Now I actually have I have just given myself 2 markets that I can quote unquote sell my electricity to. So I can use the hash huts if the price of electricity has varied in some way, or I can sell to the grid if that's what's best for me in that moment. And this isn't as uncommon as people think. The problem isn't that there is not enough energy around us. The problem is that there aren't enough ways to monetize the energy. There's a lot of waste and a lot of slack in the system all the way across these supply chains. So you look at something, I was talking to a guy up in Canada, and he was telling me how there are paper mills up there, wood processing plants, right? And what do they produce a lot of? They produce a lot of like sap and sort of kerosene type products. Well, what can you do with that? You can power an engine with that. So you might be producing paper, but your waste product is going to be something that can power an engine. So what have they been doing? Well, they go, okay, we can build power generation on site. We can use that waste product, these saps and kerosenes and things like this, and we can connect to the grid, and we can, sell carbon credits and play the fiat game, or sell into the grid and get paid for it. And they're calling us because they go, wait a second, if I could just throw Bitcoin miners on site in hash huts, instead of me selling, say, 10 megawatts to the grid, what if I just sold 5 megawatts to the grid and just mined on the other 5 megawatts? I have to keep these generators running anyway. These guys are an expense to me. The cost isn't the input. The cost is the maintenance of the facility. So now I can monetize this thing with my own waste product. And then what does that mean if I've got a 10 megawatt plant. Let's just take the whole thing off the grid and I'll just power 10 megawatts of Bitcoin miners. Well, now that's interesting from a personal level as a business person, because now I've got 10 megawatts of Bitcoin mining, and this is fantastic because my input costs are basically the cost of maintaining my facilities. But what if the grid needs that 10 megawatts? Well, the grid has something in place when it needs energy immediately. They build peaker plants, these plants that can spin up really quickly and dump excess energy into the grid. Say if you get a big spike in demand and you don't have, for whatever reason, enough supply. Well, with a 10 megawatt facility that's just humming along at this processing plant, you actually have a peaker plant. You have 10 megawatts that, if you contract with your local utility, can be deployed to your grid in emergency situations. And so this is, people talk about grid stability, but they LARP about what the implementation is, because nobody actually knows what the implementation is. That's what the implementation is. The implementation is that you have people who are mining and incentivized to mine, in this case on waste product, which is where I think we, the Dung Beetles, are going. And then under certain situations, if the grid comes and says, hey, we're in serious trouble, we need an extra 5 megawatts so that Gladys can turn her AC on, because it's a public health issue if you have rolling brownouts in the middle of a hot summer.
Right, people forget about that. Because we've electrified every part of life.
And we can shut those down. We can shut it down, and you can say, okay, cool. Here you go, grid. Here's 5 additional megawatts.
And that's usually get paid to do that.
That's
too.
astounding.
Yeah.
That's good. That's net good.
Was it, I think it was Riot blockchain that got a couple months ago paid more by ERCOT than they would have mined if they had them on.
Yeah.
But I mean, that people could spin that into a negative story, but like they're providing a service to that local community, that grid, like building all that extra electricity. You know, they're incentivized to turn off, and they can turn off and turn right back on. And it's not like you were talking about Gladys. You know, we can turn. It's a non-essential load. So they, you know, I mean, if every miner turned off, it'd be essential. But that's why.
Well, it's an incentive. It's an incentivized load,
right?
So it's like, yeah, we'll turn off for a price,
right?
And that's okay.
And they can kind of skate the dynamics of. I imagine like ERCOT wants them to build this excess capacity, that way they have more just in the general in the grid, and knowing that they can have them turn off, like whereas you can't have certain customers turn off, and in the meantime when it's non-essential, ERCOT's making that money selling the electricity to which would be lost.
Super
otherwise.
Curious to see how grid level development starts to play out, because it makes sense that if new generation starts to come onto the grid, new plants, it makes sense that they would find ways to integrate Bitcoin mining into their operations, because they have to participate in these auction systems that are so convoluted, it's unbelievable. And I'm like just beginning to start to dive into this stuff, and it's absolutely insane.
So complex.
The kinds of things that you have to do to operate, and it's this very odd intersection of policy made behind closed doors, conversations around the necessity, obviously, of having electricity on demand, but then these free market entities, which are these large generators, and it opens up this interesting conversation that I'm particularly very curious about, which is a decentralization of energy, because as you look at energy providers, it's not like Joe Schmo can just go spin up his own dual loop nat gas system it's a legal monopoly in his backyard, so that you do have this sort of capture, right? You have this capture of here are these particular people providing energy, and then it only gets even more bizarre when you talk about people that are trying to advocate for, say, shut down all the coal plants in your area. Okay, well, you can do that, but replace it with what?
Right. It's like we still need this energy. Well, that's what's going on in Europe, where they're like, hey, let's turn off all the nuclear plants while we can't afford to do it. But, we're going to do it anyway because it's good for the environment, even though everybody's going to be rioting in the streets and freezing, like I don't understand the stigma behind behind using certain energy sources. I mean, to me, it's like obvious that nuclear energy, whether it's fusion, fission, whatever, it's so much more energy dense than any other source. Like, fast forward 100 years, we're on a trajectory of more and more energy consumption as a species, and it seems like the only possible long-term play. And so, like, discouraging it and being like, we're gonna ban it because some bad things happened. Like, it seems like politics and energy markets are quite at odds, and like the politicians were like they have one agenda, but then the free market and the energy producers are like we're not focused on this, right? And so there's this sort of government intervention that I think stops innovation or hinders it at least, and makes it so that there are only like one or two companies or things that have like went successfully through all the loopholes to actually become like a regulated monopoly, like Excel or something,
It favors the big guys. Yeah, admittedly, I don't, I'm, like I say, like I would be a LARP if I was going to tell you I could give you, deep knowledge into the energy grid. I'm
save it for Tyler
this because it's so, oh my goodness, please.
Yeah, we're saving it for Tyler.
Because the more intelligent people that you can bring in that can articulate just the edges of this system, because there's no single overall way in which a quote unquote energy grid works. various grids in various jurisdictions and regions are all operating in effectively the same way, but in implementation in very different ways. Like the legal structures are all different. The kinds of energy sources that they're using are different. The way that they look at those energy sources are very different. The way that they interact with their local sort of jurisdictions and the way that they either sell or buy energy for their local populations. Different. It's insane. Like I'm getting into it now, obviously through the various things that I'm doing in Bitcoin, and I'm glad that more Bitcoiners are starting to go into the weeds and learn about this stuff. And I'm glad to see that we're sort of pulling out these engineers and these other people who have worked in the native system just to get them to explain it to us, because it is something that we take absolutely for granted. And the conversation has been stupendously surface level. The conversation has effectively been force-fed to us as you either you hate baby seals and you just want to burn coal until they choke in the mines, or you want to just go die hard into your wind and your solar, and you don't care about where it comes from, and you just want every single rooftop and every single building in America to have some solar so that you can get your Tesla going and get to and from, and you should ban internal combustion engines. And both conversations are ridiculous because the actual existent system underneath is so interesting and so much more complicated. So I'm just glad that Bitcoin is doing this thing now where we're all very curious about energy because we're working in the consumption of energy. And so we have the opportunity to learn about this stuff.
The book, The Grid by Gretchen Back.
This is one I haven't read yet.
This
was just recommended to me.
But I was planning on reading it before I have Tyler on the show, so I don't talk just surface level nonsense the whole time. But yeah, I mean, the summary, I read like the highlights, and it was like the grid is the most valuable asset piece of infrastructure in America, and we take it for granted as such. And it extends all the way from the plants to the mines, all the way down to your phone. Your phone is a part of the grid that's filming this because it cannot survive without the grid. I thought this was so interesting. It's like when your phone dies, it needs to be plugged into the grid to regenerate itself.
Yeah.
Wow.
There's a turbine spinning somewhere that's
like somehow storing
some
the video
transmission line
that's then turned into recording this. And electricity allows us to record this podcast, right? Like there's so much lights and shit going on right now.
Yeah. I think the general sense is don't try to be an expert.
Right. I think that's well, I mean, I think you don't call yourself a Bitcoin expert, but you certainly are proficient in some areas of Bitcoin mining, particularly I would say in like the testing side, right?
We're learning in public, right?
It's the best way to do it, man. I mean, some people try to hide like their mistakes, but if anything, like Bitcoin's transparent AF, right? So it's like, hey, we're going to take that same approach, same ethos. Like we're building in public, we're document our mistakes, our findings, share it with the community. So
we're talking about distributed hash.
Yeah. Tell us about. I'm just like curious. Like we've been talking about grids and all, and like you kind of led up to what you're doing in Bitcoin mining now is bringing you to learn about electricity consumption and all. And distributed hash is a hosting facility, right?
We're essentially hosting as a service that we offer, but we're Bitcoin mining intelligence. So our premise, the way that we started, was looking around in the hosting space and going, oh, this is terrible. It's absolutely misaligned incentives. You run into huge issues when you start to look at the layperson who's coming in and interested in Bitcoin mining, and then the operators, the hosting companies, the facilities, the co-locators, what their incentives are and the way in which they operate. And a lot of the conversation that we saw happening in the public sphere was Bitcoin mining should be made easy. Bitcoin mining should be made for everyone. And we looked at that and we said, that is the dumbest thing we have ever heard. Bitcoin mining is not supposed to be easy. It is not supposed to be for everyone. You should probably not be mining Bitcoin. And if you do mine Bitcoin, you should probably be as intelligent as humanly possible so that you can make intelligent choices. So we joke a little internally that we're the only hosting company that once you to leave us, because we start offering folks small and medium scale hosting in our facility, and we're very, very clear about the way that we establish things and do things quite differently from the rest of the industry. We charge for kilowatt hour consumed. We don't get in these contracts where it's you pay X dollars a month, because you have a misaligned incentive if your uptime goes down and you're still on the hook to pay whatever that might be.
It seems like it's happened quite a bit. And
we let folks actually access their machines directly and control their machines directly, which is when we set you up, say you're going to send 30 machines to us, they get set up in the facility. We set up a private VLAN, a little native secured network that then you get VPN access keys to. And so you can actually look in and validate that all your machines are there. Here's how every single one of them is running.
You can track that in real time, the hash
100%
rate. You can
real
change
time.
the pool.
You can change the way it's
to.
running. Yep. You can change your pool. You can do whatever the heck you want. We don't care. We can help you do that. We work with folks all the time who are asking us questions, and we're just interested too, because, it's aligned incentives. We want to see you hashing and running. So we align incentives in such a way that when you come in with us, the first question we ask is, what's your goal? Like, what do you want to do? Do you want 5 machines and you just want to sit and do that and get your non-KYC Bitcoin? Do you want 10 machines? Do you want to get to 50? Like, I don't want this BS salesy conversation of like, hey, buddy, what are you going to do? Like, tell us about, oh, crap, you're going to leave us. Like, you're going to get to 100 people. Because listen, we've got a facility and we don't know how a lot of this stuff works. This is all very new days. And a lot of the research that we're doing now, because a big part of what we're doing is we're conducting research on the optimal ways to run these machines, various issues in the way that these machines are built. And we're publishing this broadly so that folks know. And we try to get a sense of, based on what application you have, whether it's sort of small scale pleb mining, or even if it's sort of mega miners. We're starting to have conversations with these pubcos now. Nobody knows this basic stuff, not because people are dumb, but because people just don't know. They've never run the research, and people are typically, as you mentioned, in terms of the difficulty of setting up these facilities at all, they're so busy trying to stay alive, they're not really thinking about how to get another 3, 5, 10% marginal efficiency gain based on what their equipment is. So that's something that's been really fun for us and really, really exciting, because it's huge value across the entire mining space. And what we're interested in is in setting this standard of, hey, knowledge is power. We want to be learning in public. We want to be sharing information with people. And the best way to do that is to be conducting the research and sharing it broadly with folks. So the insight side of things, the conversations that can add value to, Joe Home Miner. I'll give you a good example. We did a little research study because we noticed that there were some Whatsminers that were failing over the course of the summer, doing very odd stuff. So
from the heat?
So we started looking at the data, right? We're like, okay, it's heat, like typical heat shutdown. And the general rule of thumb is that running an Antminer is going to be a lot more finicky in high temperature environments compared to running a Whatsminer. For whatever reason, the design of Whatsminers tend to make them a little bit more robust, the way that they shed heat, the way that they operate, the robustness of their power supplies. And what we're finding is that, it's not really the chips that are going to fail. A chip is kind of an inert thing. You pump energy through it, it gets hot. You keep it cool with a fan. Where we're starting to see a lot of issues is and of course you can torch it if you try to overclock your stuff, right? Like if you pump too much electricity through something, you're going to generate a lot of heat, you're going to fry it. So something can definitely fail at the chip level. The power supplies, we were noticing these very interesting things where power supplies were starting to overheat, particularly in the Whatsminers. And so we conducted a little bit of research. We started doing an analysis of it. And what we found is that Whatsminer in their production it looks like they were outsourcing or going through another provider for some of their PSU production. So we could very, very distinctly see that certain PSUs were labeled What's Power, which looked like they had come from the MicroBT factory, right? And there were other ones that were branded to the same spec, like P221C or something like this, branded to the exact same spec, but didn't say Whatsminer or What's Power on them. And we noticed that those ones seemed to not have the same quality control as the sort of from the factory branded What's Power ones.
And these are built into the machine too, right? Not like the old S9.
They attach to it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because the S9's like they're completely separate parts. That's the same way like that?
Structurally, they're together. You know, the PSU sits on top, but it is something that you can slide on and slide off.
But you can swap one out. Okay.
So we're looking at this because we're noticing that all of the ones that are not What's Power branded, we're starting to experience these decay issues. And Whatsminers had been amazing, and we had been these like diehard Whatsminer maximalists because we were having intake temperatures into our facility, which is in Wyoming, and not supposed to be getting temperatures over 100 degrees, right? We were getting, 40 degrees Celsius intake, which is 103 plus. And some of the machines would, everything struggles. Running electricity, any electrical appliance in 103 degree weather is above the spec of anything. So we tell whatever you're operating on is borrowed time. Just be happy that you're hashing. But some of these Whatsminers would just crank, and they were so impressive and so robust. Like the M30S++ series would just crank, absolute tanks. But we started to see this decay in these other ones. So we put together a research report on it and we publish it. And all of a sudden people start coming out of the woodwork. And they're like, oh, I thought it was something I was doing. I was running a Whatsminer in a black box. It looks like I got one of these off-branded PSUs and it happens to be decaying. Because what they would do is they would overheat. They would overheat at 40C, and then they would start overheating at 35C, and then they would start power cycling. And people would think that it was them doing something. And if I've got 2 miners, and so I have a sample size of 2, I don't know what the heck is going on.
It's not enough to compare.
But by conducting this research, which to us is really fun because, we've all been involved in research in some form or fashion. I am the smallest and smoothest brain on the team. Everyone else is very, very big brain data hogs. My role is very much to make everything human readable and to translate it from spreadsheet into here's the conversation that we can have around what this particular issue is. It's actually helping people. And now they can go warranty their machine because they have an actual rationale or a reasoning behind what the heck is going on. So that's the biggest thing to us is like, stop playing your cards close to your chest. Stop pretending like you're some like big brain expert in the space. You're all idiots because the technology has changed so much in the last 3 years.
Has Whatsminer gotten back to you guys?
It was posted in their customer service chat, the research report. I mean, I assume they know.
Right.
By no means do we have some sort of in with Whatsminer or the Antminer guys, MicroBT or Antminer. It's a bit of a black box. And in a lot of ways, you talk to the brains guys.
I need the
yeah. Oh, seriously. You talk to the brains guys, like they have the same issue. Everyone's talking about like win brains for Whatsminers.
Mm-hmm.
These dudes are having to do some crazy stuff on the Whatsminer side because even the manufacturing is very opaque. And to write firmware for these mining machines, you have to really understand what's happening.
Is it closed source?
On a board level?
Like the firmware, like the one that the stock firmware that comes with the ASICs, like MicroBT or
I don't actually know.
Bitmain.
There's tools that exist that will allow you to push and pull to the machine. So there's one that was built actually by Upstream Data called Pi ASIC. It's not incredibly well known. So the more that we can hype it, the better. But Pi ASIC is essentially an open source version of Foreman, and it will, when you run it, it doesn't have the beautiful sort of GUI that you would expect from a sort of paid thing, but that's the game of open source, right? What that allows you to do across the Whatsminer and the Antminer machines is to essentially ping a network, and it will aggregate the machines and then let you call and issue commands to them. So like stuff like that does exist. Yeah, so you can do that most definitely.
And Brains doesn't work with Whatsminer.
They haven't released it. They have released it for the lower spec ones. I don't know for certain. I know they have some lower spec stuff that's running,
like the S9. It's like they have it for the
for like the M20 stuff. I'm thinking once you get into like the M30 series, it hasn't been. Okay. It's not sort of out there. And
M20 was. What do you know? What year that was? That like 2018 version of MicroBTs?
Not 100% sure.
But they had the M20, then the M30, then they 50, right? They skipped 40.
I can't keep sense of it. It makes no sense to me. Because you know that one of their new water cooled ones is called the M33S++.
They get the mining naming schemes.
It's
anyway, Charlie wants to know what your Charlie Spears, our last guest from 24. He wants to know what your favorite model, submodel, down to the, I guess now, power supply manufacturer. What's your favorite ASIC?
Oh, geez.
I think it sounds like I don't know. You tell us.
So there's two for two different reasons, right? The first one, just in terms of robustness and functionality, is the Whatsminer M30S++. Like anything in that line, but the higher spec ones are great. It's a tank. It's an absolute tank, and that's something that people don't think about or haven't thought about. But we want to open up that conversation more and more and more. When you're looking at ASIC manufacturing, you can save a few bucks buying some off-brand stuff, but it's like buying a car that there's no place to get your oil changed.
I know exactly what you mean. When I was getting these microphones, I read something on Reddit that was like, why buy a BMW microphone and literally get wheels from IKEA? And they were talking about the XLR cables.
Oh,
it was
exactly.
Like, don't buy a really nice microphone and cheap out on the mic cable, or it will transmit the signal like crap.
What's the point? It's the exact same thing, because nobody's thinking about, what happens if a PSU goes bad or a fan goes bad.
So I got the cheapest XLR cables I could. So.
Coming to you in medium def.
And medium def. Well, Whatsminer M30S++, is there a certain hash rate?
The 110s are super robust. I mean, they're coming out with the new stuff now.
Is it better to get is it worth the extra upfront cost to get that?
Depends what you're doing. Like that's the business question, right?
If you can overclock the lower edition to the 110, if you live in Alaska or something, then that I could see the capex versus opex being.
That's the thing where you start to get into the way that the business is set up. My second favorite machine, for entirely different reasons, is the S19J Pro 96 terahash, or the 94, right?
The S19J.
And the reason for that is that these are everywhere. They're lower rated S19s because you can get those 100 terahash plus, right? And they're selling so cheap right now. They're selling so cheap.
1,800, right?
And I was doing some stuff a year and a half, 2 years ago, in experimenting with S9s and running them in an apartment.
I remember
porting the exhaust heat into my HVAC system to heat stuff up. And that's what got me into this space at all, just being interested in it. Ronan Miner, Neil, and then Joe Rogers from BTC Magazine, they did this big thing where they just bought 100-something S9s and distributed them to folks. And so I had a few of these things in the house. So these degens are the ones who got me into these actual implementations, right? But the S19J Pros, particularly these lower spec ones, in my mind, I can see those becoming like the S9s of future cycles, because the big boys don't necessarily want them if they're trying to invest their cash in more efficient and larger stuff. They need as much hash
per square meter. Yeah.
But what they give you the opportunity to do is they give you a machine that you can experiment with at home.
Lower upfront cost.
The cost is way, way lower, because how are you going to get plebs to tinker if you're charging them $10,000 for a machine? It doesn't make any sense. And I want more people to have the opportunity to kind of play with this stuff and
distribute the mining too. Yeah.
But then also there's opportunities with various modes of heat dissipation. So like we were mentioning before, substituting the cooling fins on a 96 for something like a water block cooling, which has been in computers for ages, and everyone is doing immersion right now. But I'm not a turbo bull on immersion. Steve Barber very much laid out the case and convinced me of immersion as being something nice, but not being where the industry is really going to go.
You have to pay a ton of money for all that dielectric fluid. I mean, and then anything goes wrong and all your parts are just fried.
It's got crazy issues with it. And listen, it's sexy, it's new. But I am a bull that air and immersion cooling are going to be kind of the standard, or air and water cooling,
right.
Sorry.
Just like PCs.
Because what you can do in water cooling, and the problem is that there's not enough of a market right now. There aren't enough products that people can play with. What you can do with water cooling is you can start to implement heat recapture, or you can use an ASIC as your primary source of heat generation. So you talk about Bitcoin miners as dung beetles. You say, okay, well, look at medium-sized hotels that use boiler systems to heat all of their water in their facility.
There's not going to be a water heater that's not a Bitcoin miner in 20 years. Like, why wouldn't you just heat the water with Bitcoin mining?
It's so obvious because it's a waste product.
It's
and
a
like, what do we do?
Cost too,
yeah,
right? So
we are dung
might
beetles.
as well
I want to eat your waste. Like, I want you have 50 to 100 gallons of hot water in your basement right now. That is you're just burning energy to keep the water hot.
Right.
And like, that's wonderful. You should have hot water. Why are you doing it in a pure sunk cost format? Why wouldn't you take something like a small hotel and throw a bunch of ASICs in there on water cooling and just keep your boiler hot using the existing system? You know, the DCX, and these are immersion guys, obviously, they just started posting some stuff about an implementation in a hotel where they're using what looks like a dual loop system, which is like cool oil goes through the ASIC, gets hot, goes through a plate exchanger. That heat is transferred from the oil to water. That water goes through some kind of radiator, but they're pumping that into a boiler system. And they just posted some stuff about a hotel where they're actually heating the water in a hotel using an immersion system. So I
think I saw that on Twitter.
It's here. It's happening. The simpler version is just to do it straight with water block cooling.
I had texted my dad and was like, "Hey, look, how much wattage does our our central heater at their farm use?" And I was like, let's just like throw a Bitcoin miner instead and like duct it, and because they don't use heat that much. Maybe it makes more sense in a place where they do use a lot of heat, because then the sunk cost is like more recurring. But yeah, I'm just like, I think only like one or two miners would be enough heat displacement.
It's a lot of heat
to completely substitute your entire as like central heater. Obviously, the central cooling. If you have like central cooling, that would be an issue.
Sure,
but you could put it outside, so the noise isn't an issue. Maybe put it in a black box.
This is where we're going. We're dung beetles,
right? It's like the more innovative, Like, is there a future model of a black box with like a big hole in the middle that like you put a duct through and
Oh yeah, it exists already.
Oh yeah.
So if you look at Crypto Cloaks, so 3D print shop Rick, he's already built a bunch of shrouds that you can fit on intakes and exhausts that I think they're spec'd to like 8-inch HVAC tubing. He can do various specs, right? But guys they've essentially been throwing these black boxes in their basements, and then on the exhaust ducts, they'll put like an AC Infinity, like an inline fan, and they'll just accelerate that air, create some draw on the exhaust and accelerate that air into their HVAC system. Or even simpler, put it in the basement, crack a door. Like, the heat's going to rise.
And does that just like increase the like airflow, like cubic feet per minute that is coming out? Like, does it make it more
the inline fan?
Yeah. Like, how does how does the attachment that Rick makes, how does that affect the miner?
The performance of the miner?
The performance of the miner balls, or just like the circulation, and like, is there any results you
It obviously depends on the size of the fan.
Okay.
It will typically drop the fan speed of the miner, right? Because what you're doing is you're creating a draw from the exhaust. So theoretically, it makes it quieter. There's also this thing about ASICs where a smaller fan creates a higher pitched sound.
Oh, yeah.
So there is a differentiation when you start to throw 8-inch plus fans, particularly in these inline fans. You make them larger, it sounds more like the kind of your AC unit.
Instead of
it's a different frequency. So there's trade-offs, right? So if you look in like the oil field and people go, oh, well, they're loud. Well, nothing is within, hundreds and hundreds of feet of these well pads. And because it's high pitched, the fall off of the sound happens a lot quicker over distance. It's different in the house, obviously, because everything is close. If you have it in the house, you don't want the high-pitched sound. Right. So you're finding this trade-off point where you can introduce a larger fan. You can drop the fan speed on the smaller fans. But again, nobody's an expert on this. If anybody's telling you they're an expert on it, they're LARPing and they're trying to sell you something.
Well, I've never read anybody like putting out research about decibel level and mitigating it through like different fan shrouds,
additional fans and stuff. Yeah.
Or or like turning the miners sideways to get like
we just did a big study on that.
Like you guys are pioneering that research, and at least if there's somebody else out there, like I want to know about it, but I don't see a lot of participants in the community really embarking and commissioning their own research studies about ASIC efficiencies and heat exchanging. And
that's the thing where I think it's happening because you do have a class of pleb miners who are very engineering oriented.
It's attracting,
but they're interested in optimizing their systems, right? And so they're not trying to become publishing houses of information. And then you have the mega guys who will never admit that there's a single thing wrong with any ASIC because they can't. They're publicly traded companies. And so they have their internal guys, but it's not like they're communicating amongst each other, going to the meetups being like, hey, Phil, like what happens at, the top row of this particular facility? Like, are you getting hotspots in there? Like, oh no, everything's fine.
Everything's
that's
great.
not happening. Like
short sellers have nothing to no ammo.
Yeah. Even with we were talking to, just to like do one more like little story on this research side of things. Everybody gets, my premise is that I think everybody gets intimidated by this industrial looking technology. And so they just go like, oh, somebody smart has figured it out. Even something silly with, if you ever look at an S19, something as simple as the fact that there's really two things. The first one is that, okay, so you've got these two fans, right? These intake fans. And then on the back, you've got two exhaust fans and you've got the chips between them. But set back 3-4 inches from those intake fans is your PSU, which is this, it slides onto these rails that are next to the body it's on the body of the miner. And so if you have to replace a PSU, it's easy. You disconnect everything, you slide the PSU off. But from a manufacturing point of view, you've created this really weird situation where you have these higher CFM fans that are pulled out, so closer to, say, call it fresh air, than your PSU fans, and both of these things need to stay cool. Your PSU has fans in it. So you get these weird effects. So we were running a test where what happens, because we would see these pictures of these facilities with all these S19s next to each other, like body to body.
With like the foil around them or like some sort of insulating, like there's just like two cutouts, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But they would physically be smushed together. They'd be touching each other.
Okay, got it.
And so what happens, because you have a fan that sticks out for your main intake, you've got a PSU that's set back, but then immediately next to that is another fan for the next machine.
Is that like messing with the circulation airflow?
So you have this weird effect where you get this well, where the most powerful fans are the ones that are closest to the fresh air, the intake air. The less powerful fans, which do something very important, which is keep your power supply cool, are set back. So they're not as exposed to the fresh air. So they have this issue of, are they getting overpowered in situations where your main fans are pulling super hard? Air can't get back that extra 3 inches.
Is that resulting in like the power supply getting hotter than it should?
Power supply overheats and it knocks you off sooner than it should. And so there's another small thing that I'll tease is that PSU that slides onto the body of the miner doesn't slide onto the body of the miner flush. So it's not like you've got the body of the miner and then directly next to it is the PSU. You've got like a couple millimeter gap because it's on rails. It slides on rails, so there's a little bit of a gap. The vast majority of people that you're going to look at in facilities haven't figured out that you don't want to leave that gap there. Because if I'm pulling air through the machine and I'm trying to exhaust it, I want to create a pressure barrier where it's basically one pressure on one side, one pressure on the other, and I'm keeping air cranking through this machine. Well, if I cut a hole into it, now I have issues with back pressure, where I can leach hot air back basically forward in my machine when it should be going to the back, and that can start to overheat my PSU. So it's this little stuff that nobody thinks about. And it's like, okay, well, we can build around that. We can design some kind of intervention or implementation that allows you to mitigate that. which is essentially what we're doing in the space.
You're just like sanding down the rails and so it sits flush, or
there's actually something that we haven't publicly announced yet, but it is something that we've been working with Rick at Crypto Cloaks, and it will solve both of those problems. And we are in the process of actually implementing a pilot program with a publicly traded company to get a bunch of these units onto their machines and to assess the differentiation of this product that we're putting onto these machines to see if it mitigates both those problems.
So this is effective at a larger scale, or potentially could be at like a publicly traded mine, or even like a hosting facility scale. Is this kind of research applicable, relevant, something that home miners maybe just have like one or two machines like still should be keying into?
100%. Because the thing is, everyone needs to... The difference it makes to somebody's bottom line is a function of their scale, right? So 3% with 10 machines is very different from 3% with 10,000 machines. So the incentive is larger for the big guys. But the reason we publish everything broadly is because small guys should still be able to have access to these best practices.
And you never know who could find it and maybe build on and make, even
That's
further
the idea,
observations.
Man. Like if we haven't seen anybody else doing what we're doing in the space, and frankly, like we wish that there were more of them, because like we want this to be a more competitive space. You shouldn't be wishing for a new miner that can get you, marginally more efficiency out of your machine, because that curve is almost exhausted. The jump that we had in machine efficiency from the S9 to the S19s,
it's huge,
was immense.
Which
300% like increase in efficiency. That's not going to happen on the hardware side of things.
That's
like,
why
it's just not going to happen again.
That's why I'm getting more excited about mining now, because that was one of my biggest roadblocks to mining at home before. It was like the efficiency is just, I'm going to be the machines will be worthless in a few years, right? But now we're starting to get to the diminishing increase in efficiencies where, like, I don't know, maybe like the XP, like the S19 XP 140 terahash, like assuming it runs in good conditions, like that thing from a efficiency standpoint should be cranking away 5 years from now, if not maybe 6 or 7 to to 2 halvings from now. And so the upfront cost is seeming a little more appetizing, especially now that we're down. But I still get, like, earlier in the episode, we talked about, like, hey, if you think you should be a Bitcoin miner, right, like probably think again. Like there's a lot of things you've got to, if you just think you're going to plug it in and, I think you tweeted
make magic
a
money.
great way to make 10 Bitcoin mining is to start with 20.
100%.
So
yeah,
given that it is such a challenging, it's a new industry, like, and that it's been sort of challenging. The easy days are over, right? It's only going to get more challenging, more competitive. You're competing with the big boys. Like, why would someone still mine at home? Like, why wouldn't I just market buy Bitcoin?
Yeah. I mean, it's waste and no KYC. So
that's the biggest value, is the no KYC.
No KYC is amazing. Amazing. You can buy Bitcoin through your energy bill. That's amazing. Yeah, your energy provider is selling you Bitcoin in a sense. Instead of going to an exchange or having your weekly DCA, you're buying Bitcoin through your energy bill. And if that's something that you should care about, you should care about your privacy, you should care about, staying as no KYC as possible. And it's going to and will continue to be a recurring theme in Bitcoin. And
look at the Celsius leak, dude.
14,000 plus people.
I'm on it.
You can't.
I'm on it, dude. It's awful. It's like they were, and they had like your home address too.
I didn't know that.
They
published people's home addresses.
No, they didn't. So they redacted the home addresses.
Oh, geez.
And interestingly, Celsius positioned or motioned to have the names and other stuff redacted too. And the judge was like, nope, put it out there. It's bankruptcy court. This is how it goes.
Because they'll become claimants, basically.
Right. And yeah, dude, it's literally anyone. And now you're finding like all the crypto influencers who like rug pulled everybody, and now their trades are public. Like there's like,
oh, were they doing it through Celsius?
one guy that Zach XBT
This was Crypto
Lark. Yep, he withdrew like $1 million out of Celsius, and like right before, while he was tweeting, everything's fine, dude. Come on. I mean,
what a disaster.
KYC is wrong, man. I admit that, like, I did before I realized I had a Celsius, like I had a Celsius account like in my early days of crypto, and it was empty for years, so there's like no transaction history data on there, but my name's still on it, dude, and it's like, you know,
I don't know if I signed up for it, because like stuff will come out and you'll sign up for it just to learn how it works.
That's what I was doing. It was like 2020, and I was like, oh, I can get yield on my Bitcoin.
I have to search and see if I never sent anybody any money. I've never done anything like that. But
I had some BSV in Celsius. That was my I got the fork,
that's
like
hilarious.
the BSV fork, and Celsius was the only place that like would actually hold your BSV and give you interest on it. So I sent the BSV to Celsius.
That's hilarious.
And then I found Jameson's thing about like fake Toshi, and now I work with them. So it's like, that's been years now, but
then you're done with it.
I forgot, like when I went and looked at it, I was like, oh yeah, I did have that at one point, huh?
How funny is that?
Yeah. Anyway, it's KYC is evil. It's immoral. It's dangerous. So I would, because sometimes like there's a huge premium on KYC or non-KYC Bitcoin. So your preferred method, it sounds like, of getting that would be mining. Particularly
figure out
if
a way if you're doing it at home to make it offset a fixed expense.
Costs, yeah, like your heating, like your water.
That
water
in my
heater,
mind, that's what makes sense. There's
white noise machine.
We're dung beetles. Be a dung beetle. Like,
so
look
the
for
key,
shit.
So
look
the
for
key
shit
is
that's
like
being wasted.
Finding energy use that's already happening, or finding, like, if you're just mining Bitcoin to turn a profit and that's the only consideration, maybe, especially if you have a wife, maybe think again. But
yeah, you're not going to be doing it in the house.
Right.
Yeah.
But if you,
unless you have like a black box so you can put it in the garage or outside or something,
which you can get on Upstream Data's website,
UpstreamData.ch.
There we go.
Gotta get your page shills in there, right?
That's right. Gotta give you one. But if you have like a need for heating your water, heating your home, let's say you live in a cold climate, maybe you have a electricity bill that rewards stable load instead of intermittent load. I know Excel does that, where they will give you basically half the rate. Like instead of 13 cents a kilowatt hour, they'll give you like 18 hours a day. And then,
I didn't know that.
And then the other 6 hours a day, it's like 30.
It's like a peak.
Yeah, it's a peak and shoulder. But basically, like, if you could just automate it to turn off for those 3 hours a day, assuming that like uptime would still be good enough to fit into your models, like now, like there's got to be some sort of competitive advantage that you have already existent, I think is what I'm sort of
it's all around us. Like Bitcoin miners are designed to come to you. They're designed to come to you. So when
that's a good way of putting it.
When we were going out and talking to the Adams County guys, and I got up there and was essentially saying to them, I'd hope that you'd put a little bit more consideration into this. It's not a threat to say, if you make prohibitive laws, you won't see us again. Like, that's not a threat. It's not some like, we're going to lord something over. That's not the nature of this ecosystem anyway. If you make prohibitive laws, we're gone. We're donezo. Like, do you know why? Because there are 1,000 other places that we could be. There are so many other places that we could be.
Arbitrage.
And so the winners, Bitcoin is not a game to win. It's a game to not lose. It's anti-fragility in practice. You don't ever win and get number one and hold up the trophy. You just don't die. All you have to do is not die. It's the same thing with holding.
It's the game of the Dung Beetles. You just survive.
Like, holding is hard because you have to not die. You have to not do anything dumb. You have to not get liquidated. You have to not screw up your seed phrase. You have to not make some complicated multi-sig with a 25th word and then confuse and then mess up your derivation paths. Like, it's a game to not lose. It's not a game to win.
Win by surviving. That is the goal, right?
Yeah.
Just outlast the competition.
That's all that matters. Because there are a lot of guys out there who have tens of thousands of Bitcoin that put it on an encrypted hard drive and forgot the password.
And it was harder back then too. I mean, it's...
Oh yeah, a lot more technical.
That's why things like, Cold Card and... I mean, ledgers are.
Is this your page, Shill?
No, I'm not.
And Casa?
No, I mean
Casa.com. Is it .com?
We're about to change.
.io? What is it?
Yeah, no, we're keys.casa.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I don't know how long that'll be.
Don't go to that website.
Yeah. It'll redirect if we ever change it.
Yeah.
You know, we've got some Bitcoiners on the team who know a thing or two about SEO.
There you go.
But no, I mean, it's like, yeah, obviously Casa's one way, but I mean, there's a million ways to hold
Mm-hmm.
Bitcoin. Blue Wallet is excellent. In fact, like for my like single key stuff that I do spend, like if I'm going to a Bitcoin conference and like buying merch or something, like Blue Wallet's great.
Yeah.
And I can hook it up, with the passport, with the foundation passport, with a cold card, and like just put in the XPub, so it's like a watch only address. So if my phone ever gets jacked, it's not like
nothing's gone.
I mean, first they got to get into the phone, but then even if they do, they can only see the amount of Bitcoin in that wallet. They can't.
Yeah,
they can't
and
do
they can
anything.
watch you move it.
Right, and it'll be moved before they can get into that XPub. But
yeah,
it's just like it's making it like the easier it gets, the more people will do it, and the more people will do it, the more distributed it becomes, and the more distributed it becomes, the more resilient it becomes, which then makes people want to come in because it's stable, it's secure, it's easy to use, which is sort of that virtuous cycle.
Yeah. What happens when we become the risk-off asset? It's wild. I mean, the turbo bullish statement is that we win either way, depending on what happens macro-wise, right? Like, I personally think we've kind of crossed the Rubicon when it comes to the ability to kill Bitcoin. And now there are just various sorts of vectors of attack that could put the handbrake on for a little bit. And obviously you don't want to drive with the handbrake on. So there's various ways, and the European Union saying you have to register addresses, like KYC on outbound stuff from exchanges, going after publicly traded Bitcoin mining companies, monitoring people's electricity consumptions. But on a long enough timeline, it all loses. They couldn't do it with cannabis. You look at California. California put a stay on cannabis taxes, which were insane. I think it was something like 30 to 40% taxes that the state of California would put on you if you were a legal cannabis entity, on your gross, not on your net. On your gross as a business, not on your net.
There's so much BS with that. Like I read,
and they're rolling it all back. But effectively what happens is that the black market in California became 3 to 4 times as large as the white market, because that's
incentives.
The prohibitions were so extreme that they couldn't do anything about it. They didn't have the people to monitor it. There were dudes with grow ops in industrial areas that have been cranking for like 8 to 10 years in the middle of Los Angeles.
And they were doing it on the black market before the legalization. And so you're like, okay,
exactly.
You're going to tell this person who's already been operating behind the law like for years, so clearly like not that worried about it.
Yeah.
And you're telling them, okay, now go be a good compliant citizen. And by the way, take a 40% haircut in your profits.
Oh yeah. And PS.
And they're gonna be like, yeah, great.
We just dropped the penalties. We dropped the penalties. So come into the white market. Like, dude, if you've got a standing army in the Mendocino woods, it's already defending your operation.
Yeah,
all you just heard was, if you get caught, there's going to be fewer consequences. Like, you can try. They tried it in California. You can try the Bitcoin thing in the same way they're trying it with cannabis. It's not going to work.
Well, I read that Colorado, same thing with cannabis. There was a ballot measure that was supposed to raise the tax in Colorado, and it was like they shot it down before it even made it on the ballot this year.
Yeah, because all you do is grow the black market.
Well, and because from what I've read, like on like Westward magazine and stuff, like local Denver magazines, that the cannabis industry in Colorado is like hurting really bad because you have like the cost of everything going up, yet cannabis is such a commodity.
No one's going to pay more for weed.
It's like weed is like gone down in price over the last 2 years. Yet like wages have spiked. Yeah. Food costs have spiked, everything.
Your facilities, all your
rent,
maintenance.
Everything. So they're just like really, really getting crushed. Like in their margins are getting there was like one down the street that was like, I think they had like 7 different locations. shut them all down.
No kidding.
They were just like, yo, we're done. Like,
cannabis industry is wild. When I moved to Colorado, I worked in the cannabis industry for about a year and a half, almost 2 years. Bizarre.
It's like
bizarre world. Well, for those exact reasons.
And it was such a legal gray area too.
Yeah.
Like,
you go to the conferences and dudes are like, the trap dudes are right next to like the pubcos, and they're all buddies. It was the most bizarre thing. Like, dudes are walking around the conference, like handing out samples of their shit, which you're obviously not supposed to be doing at a conference. But then you look at the packaging and you're like, oh, this is really trap stuff. Because I was doing growth and ops for a packaging company.
Okay.
That particularly worked in the cannabis space. And you look at their packaging and you go, oh, they're handing stuff out. That's kind of bizarre. And then you look at the packaging and you go, oh, this is ultra trap. Like, it would have like Cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs on it, and you're like, dude, there's no jurisdiction where you can sell your bud with both copyright infringement and appealing to kids, you know,
children, yeah.
But nobody cared. They're like, hey, we got the money, like, let's do it. It's still a cash business.
Well, now I feel like you saw Biden like did the pardon. I feel
trying to get a few more votes.
Yeah, that's what my dad said. I sent him that. I was like, hey, look, like, you know, because he doesn't like Biden, and I was like, hey, look, he's finally done something good,
done something that will help people.
Yeah, and he was he's just pandering for votes. I was like,
he's just gotta.
You're right, but like, it's good that to me this is a telegraph of like what's to come in the next few years. Like, we'll have full federal legalization.
Oh, it's not positive. Like, it'll be great from a clarity perspective. Like,
they can't a dispensary in Colorado, which is legal, like it's completely legal.
Yeah.
Cannot accept credit card, debit card. They can only accept cash, which exposes their business to theft. We go back to like Bitcoin, and it's like the whole part of having this digital money secured by a private key is like it can't really be stolen from you without the key, right? Where for Bitcoin especially, right? It's like if somebody steals, you can literally see it on the ledger, right? It's like,
I had a buddy who runs they were the first all-in-one vape pen in California. Company called Dompen, and met him down in New Orleans, became homies. He moved out to California. That's where the market was, right? And I went out to visit him, and he was telling me how it was just this bizarre head fake, because for a company that was entirely legit and entirely legal, and they were doing everything above board, there were certain things they had to do that were still trap. So he would tell me his process of producing and distributing these little like all-in-one pens that they would sell. And he said that they bought the shittiest cars they could. So like a 5-6 year old like Lexus RX 350, right? Like a mom SUV. They bought these crappy cars. Not that that's a crappy car, just that, you know, like it looked like it had run a couple of miles, right? And they would load the trunks of them with, you know, $250,000 of product, and they would have to run from shop to shop to distribute, because this is their distribution line. Same thing if you're going to like deliver sodas to your corner store. And then they would get paid in cash. And so no jewelry, no fancy clothes, no fancy sneakers,
nothing,
like
to
wear a hoodie,
suspicion.
wear some jeans. You come in, you hand them some stuff, they hand you a bag, you leave. And then you couldn't put it in the bank. Right. Because they couldn't get a bank account at the time. Now there's
and the
stuff
flag,
that has been,
you know, that kind of deposit.
There's stuff that has been like been built up so that you can work with various banking institutions. But at the time they couldn't go and do bank accounts. So they would then have to take like $250,000 in the back of a car and drive it to a biometrically secure safe house that they would go into to deposit their cash instead of a bank, because they couldn't get bank access. So just this insane stuff. He's like, yeah, dude, we have to do some really trap stuff still, even though we're in a 100% legit company. Yeah.
It sounds, it's quite antiquated. Like, you know, you hold cash, it gets eaten by a mouse, or like, you know, it's like fire, or it just gets printed out from under you.
There you go.
It doesn't matter how
That's
you
the
custody
one that you don't
cash.
see. Yeah.
You cannot protect yourself if you're holding cash. There is no foolproof, like even cash under the mattress, right? Just print it out from under you, or it's stolen. So even if you self-custody it, but like these types of like hurdles that like legal businesses have to go through, where they're probably like doing, I mean, like you said, doing everything above the line, like but just certain aspects of the financial sector particularly don't want to include them, right? Because it's not like they can't sell it. The government's saying it's fine. It's just that the banking system doesn't.
Yeah, what's the term? Like disfavored entities?
Well, they've got all, like, if you look at...
it's not illegal, we just don't like you.
Right, like Strike has like their terms of service. I'm a big fan of Strike, but like if you look at their terms of service, there's like all kinds of legal but disregarded entities or occupations that you just can't have a Strike account.
Yeah.
But like that's why decentralization, that's why self-custody is so important, because nobody can insert themselves between you and your wealth. Well, really your time, because like your wealth is just stored time.
Yeah.
That you didn't cash in on yet. So really, like, it's kind of strange to think about it. Like, somebody inserting you between you and your money is like inserting you between you and your past self time spent.
Huh.
Which, like, how could you do that? How could you insert me in between myself? Like,
and the things you've already done.
That are things that
you've
work
earned.
that I did, that I earned, right? And it's like,
we're about to go down a very esoteric rabbit hole.
Yeah, well, we'll stop. We'll stop there then.
I was ready to spin out some Spinoza and
we'll go fire away then, bro. Fire away. That's what growing up in the South, you hear people tell like crazy stories, and like back in my day.
The South, man. You're You're a New Orleansite, New Orleanian. You were
there long enough to
almost 10 years.
I'd consider that.
Yeah,
like
we had a business, had a house.
We met so we moved to Colorado from Louisiana and met in the Bitcoin community.
Yeah.
Before we both had jobs in the Bitcoin community. Yeah. And now we both work in Bitcoin.
Look at us now. Look at us now.
It is kind of like, I feel like you're my like Bitcoin journey buddy.
It is fun seeing people do that, right?
Yeah.
Like there was some other guys.
Sam
Callahan was working in healthcare, and now he's like full think boy. He's the Fed Reserve think boy. I forgot
Sam was a PT, dude.
He was working in healthcare, and he was like, man, I just remember him at the early meeting. He was like, man, I just really want to get into Bitcoin.
And now he's like swans.
He starts writing stuff, and all of a sudden it's like, yo, Preston,
brilliant.
Let's get your boy Sam.
Brilliant. I knew that, dude.
I love it. Camilla's the same way.
Yeah, Camilla and
Thevin.
Thevin like doesn't ever like go out in the community and like talk, but dude, he knows so much about Bitcoin.
Oh my goodness.
He's the one who taught Camilla about Bitcoin initially.
I remember hearing that story.
Yeah, he's
and she was, farting around with TikToks and stuff and videos, and all of a sudden it's like, man, I'm pretty into this thing. 2 months later, hey, I'm at Swan, I'm doing the thing. It's cool. This is the golden days. You look around the room and it's
Colin at Luxor now. Like,
oh my goodness,
he's writing for Forbes.
He's putting brilliant stuff
he's
down.
Like the Bitcoin mining writer. I would say like he's coming on the show.
As I lay HODLing, that's his handle, right?
Yeah, he was writing for CoinDesk, covering Bitcoin among other coins. Much
Jumps
to
in the
his
Luxor
chagrin,
team. Yeah,
and just like threw himself into Luxor like before they were even. I never even heard. Like, it was the first time I ever heard of Luxor.
Sure. Yeah.
And now the hash rate index is like one of my most read publications. I don't know where else to go to get that kind of depth about mining research, and whether it's the publicly traded companies, the machines, like, dude, the Colorado Bitcoin community,
up,
like, there's been several people who over the last 2 years have really like found their place within the community. And there's like, that's why I love going to like the Denver
meetups
because it's like, yo, like 2 years ago we were all just a bunch of plebs, and we all still are a bunch of plebs, right? But like, but now we're like plebs that are like finding our
building stuff,
right? We're finding our niche, our thing, and
it's cool to see, because I have the sense that in 3 to 5 years, whatever we're going to be looking back on is going to be, this will be the golden era, right? Like everybody sleeping on the metaphorical mattress, just trying to figure stuff out. And that's what everybody's doing. Like everybody, regardless of where they find themselves in the ecosystem, just made this choice to go, yeah, I think this is going to be my ride or die.
Yeah.
I think I'm just going to jump on and see where this takes me.
That binary, like I'm either in or not. And,
yeah.
And I'm in. So,
and it is a jump, right? You know, there's a lot of good reasons to keep fiat mining.
Oh, yeah.
There's lots of good reasons to keep fiat mining.
Still
your
fiat.
Family and you've got your ecosystem and your stability, and you're only working 15 hours a week, but you're making a comfortable 6 figures. And there's loads of people like that in the space who are doing their thing, but it's just the people who have made the jump and are just going to say, okay, like I'm going to do this. It's going to suck for a little bit. It's going to be hard. We're going to have to figure out where we're going. Like, what are you building? I don't know, but we're going to build it. Like, that's kind of what it is. And we're all building in public. And biggest thing is just making sure that everybody keeps their head on straight and doesn't start selling their altcoin in a year and a half and doing something different, because this is a game. This is a game to lose, not a game to win.
Right. It's a survival game, like you were saying. Yeah, man. There's been a lot of people who I respect over the last couple of years also kind of fall off. I'm not gonna like name anyone specifically, but our listeners already know who those people are.
On a long enough timeline, you either sell a shitcoin or you become Matt Odell. You just go full stay humble, stack sats. It's got to be it.
That's the
that's
the fork
take
in
some
the road.
fee BS, or you start shilling some altcoins because these are interesting projects.
Or you tweet 2 words, stay humble, stack sats every morning.
That's right. And that's it.
Matt, I owe a lot of my privacy suspicion and awareness to Matt.
What a dude.
Yeah. He doesn't get enough credit, man. I mean, he's not a, easy to fit in a box type of personality.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what I like about him. Because he's like, yo, I'm going to tell you what is up.
Yeah.
And I don't care whether you like me. I don't care if you think I'm smart or not. Like, he just is authentic.
Yeah, he lives it out. I obviously met him through the space, but then had the chance to schmooze a little more at the Bitcoin and the Beef Initiative out in Gunnison. The Texas Slim was pulling out there, which was fantastic.
I wanted to go, dude.
Holy cow! You want to talk about a love fest, dude?
All the right
Texas
things.
Slim, man, dude deserves a lot of credit for going out there and building the plane while it's flying and putting the pieces together and just getting the people in the room, because that's what he's been doing. He wasn't shilling anything. He wasn't trying to like pump some grand plan from the jump. He's really a master marketer, man, a master communicator. Like, got people in the room, started the conversation, let the cream rise to the top, kept stoking the things that worked, started getting people to have conversations with each other. It was a love fest out there when we got everybody for a couple of days out in Gunnison. Because what happened? A bunch of us came out, we're camping for a couple of days, so it's like late night campfire conversations.
Yeah.
During the day, we're going to the ranch, we're hanging with the ranchers. There's this bizarre, I mentioned odd bedfellows, right? Strange people coming together. Ranchers and Bitcoiners realizing that they actually have a lot in common. They care about the same things. This transcends politics or ideology or race, class, or creed. It's simply, Econo Alchemist gets up there and he tells the story about a disenfranchised rancher and the way that the state was preying on him to try to seize his land and to bar him from ranching. And he introduces the concept of how Bitcoin protects against that. And everybody in that stinking room, whether you were a Bitcoiner or you're a rancher, was simultaneously outraged and saw what was on the other side. And that was so cool to experience. And then Matt shows up, and the dude could be in a stadium giving a keynote on some new insight in the space, but he's having 50, 100 people download a wallet and then sending sats to them for the first time. So amazing. Living out your creed. It doesn't matter at what scale. If you do the right things, eventually the universe will shape itself around you to let you keep doing those things. So that's cool to see.
Yeah, I completely believe in that. It's like, just put your all into something, and if you do it and don't give up, it'll either be good enough to where people will eventually start like receiving it and appreciating it, or you'll become so authentic that even if it's not that good, people will appreciate. Like I'm just thinking about like the podcast and that, like, you know, it's like 10 years later.
It takes time.
Yeah. It's like, I mean, this isn't the best Bitcoin podcast out there. It's definitely better now that you've been on it, but you know, it's like every episode I try to get like 1% better. You know? And hopefully that's happening.
Maybe that's what's great about this space right now. It's because we're watching people locally, digitally, in real time get 1% better. Yeah. That's cool to see, because I want to be the biggest hype man for people that are building stuff, people that are doing interesting stuff. Like, I don't care if it sucks, because it's not going to suck if you keep doing it in 2 years.
Right. Like, or like 10 years from now, like how many Bitcoin podcasts have 10 years of history, have 10 years of guests, have 10 years of work, have 10 years of production improvements, right? Like, I think tying it back to what you're saying about like HODLing is the hardest part.
Yeah.
It's like starting something is easy. Like getting that initial excitement. It's like, hey, let's start a podcast, or like, let's buy Bitcoin. It's a world-changing idea. And then like you get into episode 9 and
like, this is boring now.
I've got 12 listeners and Bitcoin's down to 25K. And it's like,
I don't want to play with you anymore.
Right. It's like, okay, that was cool. Maybe I'll try another idea. Right. And like, that's what you see America as a whole like do. It's like thing to thing to thing, attention span couldn't be shorter. And so what you find is like lack of quality. Like people don't get down to they don't get past the surface level enough. And the quality of things just reflect that. Like,
you know, the best business right now?
Laundromat?
I was going to say flag manufacturers. Because as long as you can spin up a flag to sell to people for the next big thing.
Doesn't matter what the thing is.
You're always in the money. You're always in the money. As if you can just sell flags to people. Yeah, and you can sell your Ukrainian flags. And you can sell your Trump 2024 flags and your Kanye 2024 flags. And as long as you can just keep spinning up vector files, you are always in the money. Flag manufacturing.
Any kind of skill that you can just repurpose, like microphone, like understanding lighting.
I was making more of a commentary on the BS of the modern era.
Oh yeah, no, I got it. Yeah,
not too seriously.
The 2024 candidates on both parties look pretty pathetic, but I don't think either party represents either you or I. So
no, and I think that's the Bitcoiner. That's going to be a big chunk of the growing Bitcoiner ethos, are people who want to opt out.
Single issue voters.
Yeah,
I was not a single issue voter before Bitcoin, and now.
What is your single issue? Is it get off my lawn? And by lawn I mean rights.
Yeah, I think my single issue would be the government has no right to tamper with the money, and if you believe that is true, then I will dive further into your views.
Yeah.
But if you believe that, I'm like, nope, you're a communist, or
that's
like your state is. You're. To me, it's no different than saying the state should have control over your beliefs, like about religion. It's like it is something as fundamental because it's your time, and it's you. Like I was saying a few minutes ago, like it is you in the past. It's your time, it's your decisions, it's your work. It's a part of you. And so if the state is saying like, I control this, get off my lawn.
I'm curious about how you see that playing out, particularly so we're currently in, for all of those future listeners, a forced deflationary environment, right? Rates are rising. The stock market is contracting. Inexplicably, Bitcoin is not zero. It seems that we just will be forever in the 19 to 20,000 space. There's all these consequences, right? Because you haven't just, in reference to what you're saying, was stealing time, taking people's time, their accrued time. To me, there's sort of the two assets that the boomer class, which are now going through their peak retirement era, peak time in terms of retirement relative to their age, their cohort, right? They have their houses and they have their saved assets and their 401ks or whatever sort of retirement accounts they have. Now, excluding kind of fixed income, because if you have inflation, your fixed income is worth less. That's one way that you choke out your old. Is this going to orange pill boomers when because the house, you figure, okay, you're a boomer, whatever you're paying on your mortgage is not, it's marginal, it's inconsequential, right? My mom is paying less on her mortgage for a house that's worth substantially more than the house that my wife and I have, just as a function of rates and inflation over time, right? But that 401k, seeing it 30, 40% down, is that going to start orange pilling boomers when they look at this?
Especially if they're allocated to bonds.
And have their time stolen? Because I've just stolen. Now then, the opposite question is did I give you time that wasn't yours? So in a fiat environment, did I give you turbo growth and steal time from someone else?
If your purchasing power was higher, yeah. But I would say like most people's 401k rates of return compounded probably didn't even keep up with the compounding growth rate of prices. Like, yeah, I would say, sure, if you were like Peter Thiel and you grew your Roth IRA at like 100% CAGR, yeah, you stole other people's time because you can now extract more resources out of the economy in a real term, like excluding inflation, than you would have been able to otherwise. But that like for most
doesn't apply to like mom and pop.
Yeah, for most people, like
matched 4%.
They know because they probably didn't invest early enough. They probably sold the bottom in 2008. They probably, they did all kind of things that go against commonly held knowledge of, and probably grew their rate of return at less than the S&P 500.
Yeah.
So they more likely have had some of their wealth pilfered from them in the form of like purchasing power at least. So
it's so curious to me because it either delays retirement or it sends people back to work. But it's stolen time. It's all the same thing, right? You've stolen somebody's time. It's irrespective of how you got about it. Did you get it by, getting time allocated to you in money that wasn't yours, or are you not being given as much as you can? The problem is, right, in a fiat system, you can't know because there isn't a unit of account.
Well, because the most important signal is price, because price tells you what the market thinks of a certain thing. And so if you obscure or skew the signal, then you can't possibly make sense of it. Like the most obvious example to me is like home values. It's like, are homes more valuable because homes are more valuable, or are homes more valuable because the dollar's less valuable?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, to me, I think the latter is the truth, but most people probably never even ask themselves that question.
No, because home prices always go up.
Right. Up in what? In dollar terms, sure, right? You look in Bitcoin terms,
yeah,
it's quite the opposite.
Yeah.
So the sort of like positioning that, okay, there's a denominator in the price. I forget that, like when you quote Bitcoin or when you quote Apple stock, right? Like you're quoting AAPL/USD.
Yeah.
You're not quoting there's a second part of that quote that's left out usually, but there's a currency on the other side of it that also as equally in magnitude affects the price. Like what Apple's performance and the dollar value of the, that it's measured in
are still correlated.
Right. They both affect the price of Apple stock, so
regardless of what the business is doing.
Completely irrespective of the business.
Wow.
Like, and that's where I'm like, so in that regard, I'm bullish on Bitcoin no matter what happens to the dollar index and the other fiat currencies, because I see it coming out two ways. The more likely is that hyperinflation makes Bitcoin worth, $100 million or whatever. And then, we can buy 100 houses, 1,000 houses per Bitcoin or whatever, right? The other, and those nominal values are astronomical.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's the opposite, where instead of hyperinflation, the U.S. plays hardball. They lure the whole world into like austerity and then deflation. And let's say we have like the dollar milkshake theory or whatever. You still come out ahead because, okay, let's say the dollar crashes by 99%, tightens, like there's still only so many number of Bitcoin. So even if Bitcoin were to go down in dollar terms, it still may go up in purchasing power. So either way, it's like, as long as you're focused on purchasing power and not on dollar value, because what does that even mean?
Yeah.
Then like, it's easier to stay focused on or tune out the noise and focus on the signal. So, well, It's been what, hour 40, bro.
It's heavy. That's a heavy way to end it.
Yeah,
I think everything is screwed. Bitcoin is fine.
Regardless, like if the dollar crashes, Bitcoin will crash in dollar terms, but it'll still be valuable. It's like the number is arbitrary.
Yeah,
completely arbitrary. It's how much purchasing power can I get per unit. That is the only thing that matters. Like whether one Bitcoin is 100 million and I can buy 10,000 homes with one Bitcoin, or whether one Bitcoin is $10,000 and I can buy 10,000 homes with a Bitcoin.
Sure.
Like that numbers sound kind of off, but it doesn't matter to me,
but
right?
It's like,
what
the question
I
is
trade my time
the
for
pain
this.
you have to go through to get there.
Well, if my purchase,
what is the pain that we go through to get there?
If dollar value of Bitcoin crashes, but the purchasing power in real terms increases, what pain is there? I'm able to buy more things than I was able to buy before, but now I have a tax loss.
I'm thinking more macro, right? Like
it doesn't.
The pain. What's the social pain? Because that's the thing.
That's why the austerity won't happen.
At least any decent human being, nobody wants to see people suffer.
Right. That's why
as a result of implementing their ideas about the way the world should be.
That's why the hyperinflation is far, far, far more likely in my mind, because
that's your guess.
No one's going to sign. No politician who is short-term motivated is going to be like, yeah, you know what? Screw it. Make everybody suffer in the name of, responsible monetary policy. Like maybe Volcker could have done that back in the day, but that ain't going to fly today. Not with the national debt to GDP, not with the, interest rates the way they are, not with the energy crisis unfolding in Europe. It's just austerity is out of the question. So that whole dollar milkshake theory, everything crashing, but Bitcoin going up in purchasing power, doesn't make any sense to me. The only outcome I would bet on is Weimar Germany. We're going to hold out till the final second that we can in tightening, and then we're going to pivot and we're going to turn the money printers back on. Because it's the only...
And the roof's going to blow out.
Maybe. Or maybe they do this again. Maybe they print it and then they tighten it again. And I don't know how many cycles. If there's one thing that I've learned over the last 10 years working in finance and now working in Bitcoin, it's that the Fed has an amazing ability to string out the narrative longer than I ever thought they would. And that whether that's a combination of them being smart at how they frame it in rhetoric, or the population being clueless or not caring, for whatever reason, I've seen the hard money thesis and the soft money fiat for a decade, but I would have said over and over again, it would have already came crashing down by now, and here we are. So they have done an amazing job of kicking the can down the road.
Yeah.
So what questions should I ask Adam, your coworker, Upstream Data?
You got to ask him... One thing that he is very good at is he's very good about getting himself into the headspace of pricing things in Bitcoin. Because he thinks always about Bitcoin as a unit of account. So I would like to understand what flipped the switch for him. Like how did he get used to that? How did he get comfortable with it? What sparked it? Because it's something that I still think of things in nominal...
In fiat terms.
In fiat terms, right?
Too.
And he has done a good job, at least in the way that he engages with the modeling, and he applies it to the mining side, obviously, of flipping it into the priced in Bitcoin. And I'm not there yet, so I want to know how he does it.
So that's the standard.
Yeah.
What do you think he'll say?
I have no idea. He's either going to say, that's the dumbest question I've ever heard. It's terribly easy. And then he's going to rip
just change your mind.
5 minutes about how easy it is.
Well, it's we started off the podcast talking about Croesus, and to end talking about Croesus, he taught me there's 4 stages of money. The first one is now I'm going to blow it. First one is speculative asset. People think something's going to be valuable. The second is a store of value. Actually, maybe this was Eric Yakes. I don't know. They're both 2 of my favorite writers in the space. So either way, Eric, if it was you, Croesus, if it was you, thank you.
Big props, yeah.
Second stage, store of value. So the fact that so many people speculate is a self-fulfilling prophecy that makes it valuable. And then so many people store their value in it that people start exchanging things for it. The third phase, medium of exchange. And then finally... Well, Rob, we're trading commerce in this thing all the time. I might as well start denominating my wealth in that unit. fourth stage store value. So Adam's like already at stage 4.
Yeah.
We'll see how he
got there.
How he got there. He must have like jumped the gun. He got a head start.
He's a passionate dude.
You know, like the track. He heard the whistle before us.
That's right.
Well, where can everybody find out more information about your various affiliations?
Let's do it. Let's shill hard.
The shill. I should call this the shill corner.
Find me online at Bikes and Bitcoin on Twitter. You will see a mix of insightful threads and shit posting. You can learn, obviously, about Upstream Data. You can find them anywhere. Google Upstream Data. Find their website, upstreamdata.ca, about to switch to upstreamdata.com. You can find them on Twitter as well. You should check out the other guys on the team. So obviously CEO Steve Barber, very good person to keep your eyes on how to avoid the fiat Ponzi. Denver Bitcoin, Adam, Jeff and Dean, who are 2 other sales guys. Fantastic. That's sort of the Canadian crew because it's a Canadian company, right? If you're looking into the research that we're doing, the distributed hash stuff, Twitter, it's hash distributed. You can ping Arcerus_BTC. So he is big brain on the a lot of the implementation and the networking and the tech side of stuff, and always a good person to talk research with. I'm always happy to talk research too because this stuff is fascinating and like nobody's an expert. We're learning in public, right? Yeah, find us. Join the conversation. You probably shouldn't be Bitcoin mining, but if you really want to be Bitcoin mining, don't think this is going to be 50% margins that you're going to be cranking for the next 10 years. Put your head on straight, like jump in the conversation. We're all a little bit touched in the mining space, a little bit of a psychopath. But that's how it should be. This is kind of the rough and tumble world of Bitcoin. We're not like these shadowy super coders who have the luxury of sitting in their basements and slamming energy drinks all day and just having big brain implementations. It's far more roughneck in the mining ecosystem.
You're not dreaming it up in a office. You're out in the warehouse building it.
Yeah, you get kicked in the nuts a lot more.
The idea of mining is still just, it's like who in their right mind signs up for a business where programmatically every 4 years your revenue gets cut in half on a set schedule.
Yeah.
Takes a certain kind of psychopath to do it. So I'm happy to be on the ride with you, man.
I love it. It's been a pleasure. It's been a huge pleasure.
Glad you made it out to the very first in-person Value Stack podcast recording. We'll see how it comes out.
We'll see. I can't wait to see it.
Spin number 25, Value Stack podcast. Rob, thanks for coming on, man.
Huge pleasure. Thanks for having me.